My name is John Smith. I'm currently working as a construction worker at the age of 60. I had a wife and daughter, but for some reason, 3 years ago, while I was away at work, my wife suddenly disappeared. My wife's name was Mary Smith, 52 years old at the time. When I was 56 and my daughter was 30, my wife suddenly vanished. That evening, I thought I had finished my work for the day and was taking a breather. As I sipped my cup of coffee and glanced at my phone screen, I noticed an enormous number of missed calls. My daughter had never called like this before. Thinking something must have happened for her to call during work, I hurriedly called her back, and my daughter Catherine said in a tearful voice, "Dad, Mom's gone." At the time, my wife, who had said, "I'll save up for retirement until we enter a nursing home," was working part-time 4 days a week. However, today shouldn't have been one of her work days. With a bad feeling, I tried calling my wife's parents' home and her workplace, but they said she hadn't shown up. I didn't know the names or contact information of my wife's friends. Of course, I also contacted the police and asked them to search for her, but days passed without any news of her being found, let alone any sightings. 3 years went by without finding any clues. With absolutely no leads on my wife's whereabouts, my daughter and I had to act as if she never existed in order to maintain our composure. So we managed to smile and put on a normal face while living our lives. About a year into this daily routine, my phone suddenly rang again. It was the police. I hurriedly answered, only to be told that my wife's decayed body had been found in a distant location. The emotions I felt at that moment are truly indescribable. I have done all sorts of mischief and bad things that made my parents furious, but this was the first time I had been plunged so deeply into the abyss of darkness. She was kind, good at reading people's hearts, and I never tired of being with her no matter how long we were together. She was one of the few people like that. Despite being married for many years, my love for my wife never faded. Rather, as the years passed, my desire not to lose her grew stronger. I often said to her, "Hey Mary, don't go before me," because I hated the thought of her passing away before me due to lifespan or illness. At work, I had always been a reliable and strict boss, but in front of my wife, I was like a child. However, even when I expressed such pathetic complaints, my wife never got exasperated and would smile gently, saying, "Well, I don't know about that, but I'll try. I'm not as lonely as you, so I could probably manage somehow, but you don't seem to be like that." But I knew it was meaningless to make such promises. There was also the possibility that my wife, who wasn't very physically strong, might pass away first. But I couldn't bear the thought of her disappearing in such an obvious way, as if someone had taken her away. At my age, I cast aside all shame and cried like a man. Regardless of what my grown daughter and the nurses thought of me, I was no longer in a position to put on airs in front of my wife's altered appearance. At that time, I fought with intense anger every day, feeling that there was no way my wife could have suffered such a cruel fate, and hating the perpetrator who must have existed so much that it felt like all the bodily fluids in my body were boiling. However, once the funeral was over, I couldn't say that anymore. Catherine, my parents-in-laws, and I were left with no choice but to return to our normal lives, carrying an unsalvageable sadness. I believe my wife and I were a happy couple, no matter how many years we were married. I probably, or rather definitely, expressed more affection. It was like I was showering my wife with love, and she was just going along with it. But since she didn't seem bothered by it, I continued to express my love for her with my whole being, even in front of Catherine. As Catherine grew older, she started to look at me with a somewhat cold gaze. Although Catherine sometimes seemed a bit detached, she never looked down on our levi-de-vie behavior or showed genuine disgust. By the way, on holidays, I often went out with my wife to buy small things like new towels or curtain fabric because I wanted to be with her, and we always spent seasonal events like New Year's visits to churches, Easter holidays, beach trips, and wedding anniversaries together. We had a favorite restaurant with a beautiful ocean view that we always visited, and whenever we went to that restaurant, it was a rule that the two of us would go together. Of course, it's fine to go with my daughter, but if she's young, she might start crying loudly, which would obviously bother the other customers. Even if my wife and I took turns looking after our daughter, we wouldn't be able to relax. So on this day, We always left our daughter with my parents or my in-laws, dressed up a bit, went out, had dinner at that restaurant at the end, and then went home. When my tired wife was affectionate with our daughter, I thought it would tire her out even more, so I always had our daughter stay over. When she was little, I wondered if it was a bit sad to do that, but I figured it would be okay to have a day like that once in a while. Fortunately, although my daughter cried a bit at first, thanks to my mother-in-laws, who were used to looking after children, she quickly learned to behave quietly. I felt a bit bad for my daughter, but I wanted to cherish the time with my wife at least on our anniversary, so I had my daughter put up with it. However, that wife is no longer here now. Moreover, I don't even know the reason why she disappeared or why her life was cut short. There were no noticeable marks on my wife's body, nor any signs of her being forced to ingest something. The police speculated that she might have been taken away by someone and then met with an unexplained illness that took her life. Naturally, neither Catherine nor I could accept such a reason. However, no matter how much we investigated or hired a detective agency, we couldn't obtain a single piece of information about my wife. Since then, both Catherine and I have been spending our days in a daze. In front of colleagues and classmates, we managed to smile and act like normal people trying to recover, but there's no way we could immediately try to recover when my wife suddenly went missing and lost her life. We forced ourselves to smile until we were exhausted, and at home, we were like expressionless dolls, unable to move much. Both of us were probably at our limits. Perhaps it was fortunate that both Catherine and I could still go to school and work, maintaining our connections to the outside world. Before we knew it, a year had passed since my wife disappeared, with both of us feeling somewhat down. Until then, I hadn't wanted to do anything that would remind me of my wife, but one day, I suddenly realized that it wouldn't let my wife rest in peace. So I thought about going with my daughter to celebrate at that high-end restaurant by the sea that we visited every year on our anniversary. It was partly to honor my wife's memory, but more than that, it was to draw a line so that we could gradually accept my wife's absence and live together, just the two of us. While overcoming my wife's disappearance, we would remember and talk about her on this day every year. Even after overcoming it, we wouldn't act as if my wife never existed. It was my way of drawing a line while still confronting the fact that she was here and turning it into good memories that we could talk about. A week before our anniversary, I asked my daughter Catherine, "You know, I've been thinking lately if it's okay for us to keep living like this, feeling down. What do you think, Catherine?" Then she honestly shared her feelings, saying, "To be honest, I still don't want to accept that Mom is gone. But as time passes, I'm gradually accepting it whether I like it or not. However, I feel like it'll take a bit more time before I can truly laugh from the bottom of my heart like before." I see. Thank you for sharing your feelings, Catherine. Look, I don't know if doing this will be a solution to anything. You know how every year, your dad and mom celebrated their anniversary together at a restaurant, right? And now, it's going to be your dad and mom's anniversary again. I want to celebrate with you on that day, but what do you think? If you don't want to, you can tell me. When I asked that, Catherine replied, "Yeah, I don't know if it'll help me sort out my feelings, but I do want to celebrate. So if you think it's a good idea, Dad, I'd like you to take me." The next day, I tried to go shopping with Catherine for clothes to wear to the restaurant. However, Catherine didn't really like ready-made clothes and preferred slightly retro-looking designs or simple clothes that were hand-me-downs. Catherine wanted to wear a dress that her mother had worn when she was young. So during one of my few days off in a week, I explained the situation to my parents-in-law and asked if they had kept any old clothes. Then my mom said, "Oh, the old ones. I think we've kept them." On the promised day, when Catherine and I visited my parents-in-law's house, my slightly frail-looking in-laws greeted us with a smile. Perhaps it was because their only daughter was gone. Since that day, my in-laws started welcoming us even more warmly whenever we visited. I had heard that my Mel had always been strong-willed and had cheerfully supported the household in place of my Phil, who wasn't very strong and couldn't work vigorously. But after my wife disappeared, her way of speaking became so weak and timid that I thought that story must have been a lie, and although she had a fairly sturdy build, she had become stooped and skinny. Until then, whenever I visited my in-laws' house, I always thought she seemed like a bright and cheerful matriarch with a lively voice. But now she gave off such a sad impression. And the same went for my Phil, who had originally been thin and seemed lacking in energy. He used to smile and be gentle, but his face, which had been cool and composed, had become so haggard and aged that he was unrecognizable. Although it was clear from their expressions that they were mentally distressed, it must not have been easy for them to accept us with a smile, as we were a reminder of their deceased daughter. I understood that well, as I had been hiding my sadness outside and pretending to be normal until now. And it must have been the same for Catherine. Catherine stared intently at her grandparents' demeanor with a slightly complicated expression, but realizing that they were doing their best to entertain her, she decided to keep a smile on her face. Catherine put on a cute smile and said, "Grandpa, Grandma, long time no see. Have you been well?" and followed her grandparents into the house. Entering the house, there was a somehow nostalgic scent. The in-laws' house, with the tiles, the various types of trees growing around the house, the scent of laundry, and the mats made of some kind of plant, always had a nostalgic and refreshingly transparent scent. It was a clean and strangely pleasant scent that was completely different from our perfectly ordinary home, and it somehow resembled my wife's impression. I secretly liked my in-laws and this house. When we were shown into the living room, which had an interior that somehow reminded me of being in nature, there was a chic, navy blue dress hanging there. It turned out that my in-laws used to have meals at nice restaurants on important days, just like us, so they understood what kind of clothes to wear. This dress was apparently bought by my wife when she attended a wedding a long time ago. However, since children don't have many opportunities to be invited to weddings, it seems the dress had only been worn about twice. Catherine seemed to take an instant liking to that beautiful and elegant dress. "Grandma, thank you. I'll wear this to celebrate Papa and Mama's anniversary," she said gratefully, and Mimo smiled and said, "Is that so? I didn't expect you to make such a suggestion. We had also been feeling down since she disappeared, but we knew you were also losing your energy. So we're relieved to see that we're trying to recover little by little. We still have a long way to go, though. You're so grown up despite being so young. Catherine, please talk about her for us too." Her face was smiling, but it somehow looked like she was crying, and neither Catherine nor I knew what to say. On the way home that day, holding the beautifully wrapped dress, Catherine and I were silent. Seeing my in-laws, who clearly hadn't fully accepted my wife's absence, I felt a complex mix of emotions. As a parent with a daughter, I understood their feelings all too well. It's not about forgetting my wife, but isn't trying to overcome her disappearance both a step forward and also a cold-hearted thing to do? No, that's not it. We're just thinking that way to make ourselves feel better. After seeing my in-laws today, those thoughts resurfaced, and I was holding my head in my hands. However, perhaps noticing that I was agonizing over something, Catherine asked, "Dad, you know why we're going to the restaurant with memories of Mom tomorrow, right?" In response, I managed to squeeze out my voice and said, "Yeah, I'm the one who suggested it, but I'm sorry for showing you my hesitation. Let's make tomorrow a good day." Then Catherine said, "Yeah, of course, it's okay to feel down from now on too, but it would be nice if we could reduce those times even a little. Also, I don't think it means forgetting Mom or betraying her. So just keep that in mind," and gently lowered her eyes. The smile she gave my in-laws earlier, and these strangely perceptive words. Catherine had also been deeply troubled and depressed, but she had been thinking about various things and had grown this much. Also, her uncanny sharpness when it came to thinking of others and her smile somehow resembled my wife's, and I felt my eyes welling up. I had tried not to show tears in front of Catherine as much as possible, but crying in a place like this was uncool, and some strange sense of pride made me clench the muscles around my eyes. A few days later, the day of my anniversary with my wife finally arrived. Wearing clothes that were as appropriate for the occasion as possible, although not as expensive as what the other customers at the restaurant would wear, we stood in front of the restaurant door. Since we had made reservations every year until my wife disappeared, I had a faint hope that the old staff might still be there and remember us. With that hope, I opened the door to the restaurant. "Welcome," a young waiter greeted us in a calm voice. When I told him the reservation time and name, the waiter's expression suddenly changed to a suspicious one. "I apologize. Please wait a moment while I confirm," he said and disappeared into the back of the restaurant. As instructed, we waited near the entrance of the restaurant. Then the waiter returned and stopped in front of us with good posture. But was it my imagination? The atmosphere seemed worse than before. As I was puzzled by the black aura he was giving off, Catherine also seemed to have sensed something amiss and had a quizzical look on her face. The waiter bowed deeply once, and then, to our surprise, he said, "Dear customers, I apologize. Are you sure you made a reservation for today?" There had never been such a thing even once when I came with my wife. I hurriedly took out my smartphone and checked a call history. Then I asked for the phone number of this restaurant and showed proof that I had called this number. However, the waiter just furrowed his brow as if troubled. "Indeed, it seems you have contacted our restaurant, but perhaps we declined and suggested a different date because this day was fully booked," he said. I was about to explode with anger at his words. That can't be. If we were declined, we would have given up. When I called, I wasn't told a word about not being able to make a reservation. In fact, I was even told, "We look forward to seeing you on the 27th. So isn't it strange that the reservation wasn't made? Please call the owner of this restaurant. And could you also find out which staff member was working on the 20th at 3 o'clock and took my call? Today is the anniversary of my late wife. I came to celebrate with my daughter. On such an important day, I can't stay silent when told something like this. It doesn't seem like I can have a proper conversation with you, so please hurry and call the owner." I said that as calmly as possible, and Catherine must have also noticed the waiter's somewhat condescending attitude and tone, as she silently glared at him without trying to stop me from getting worked up. Perhaps it was because of my face, which looked like I was smiling even when I was serious. Or maybe it was because of my habit of trying to remain calm and not express my opinions much. I don't know if he picked up on that this guy can be messed with aura or if he instantly judged that our clothes were cheaper than the other customers, but the waiter's demeanor had been strange since he greeted us. I could tell from his seemingly polite and soft-spoken way of talking that he was clearly looking down on us and mocking us. When the waiter noticed that I was angry, he chuckled as if amused and said, "Well, I understand what you're saying, sir, but unfortunately, the owner is also busy and doesn't have much time. So I can't call him out for a request that I'm not sure is true or not." At his terribly unpleasant attitude, I was about to boil over with anger, when Catherine suddenly leaned forward in front of me. "Oh, is that so? Then we have an idea too," said Catherine. I was completely baffled by what Catherine had suddenly said with such confidence, and I could only stare at her in disbelief. Then, the waiter laughed even more strangely and mocked her, saying, "Oh, is it you, still so young? And what might your idea be?" Just as she was about to say, "It's..." At that moment, a person wearing clearly higher quality clothes than the waiter hurriedly walked out from the back of the restaurant. Seeing that familiar face, I involuntarily smiled. "Owner, you're still working here. I was worried that you might have left," I said, and the owner first apologized profusely to me and said, Mr. Smith, I'm terribly sorry that our employee was so rude to you on this occasion." Then, for some reason, he hurriedly rushed over to Catherine, and after staring at Catherine's face up close once more, he asked, "Could you possibly be Dr. Catherine Smith, who works at a university hospital?" Catherine said, "Yes, I am indeed a doctor working at a university hospital, but I'm sorry. I see so many patients that I don't remember you. I apologize, but who might you be?" and smiled apologetically. Then the owner began to explain why he knew Catherine. The owner's father was the founder of this restaurant and was quite a man of character. Even if someone came from a poor family, even if they didn't have an education or prior experience, he believed that it was fine as long as they started by washing dishes and did what they could, learning from skilled chefs and waiters. Because he had such flexible thinking, he didn't hire people who were capable but seemed likely to become unpleasant bosses with twisted personalities, and while hiring based on ability, he also gave opportunities for advancement to the underlings and waiter trainees who were trained under them. As a result, the quality of this restaurant's employees became quite high, and until he retired from the position of chairman a few years ago, it was famous for its good service. However, 2 years ago, the chairman suffered a stroke and was in a critical condition, uncertain if he would breathe again. At that time, it seems the one who saved the owner's father was Catherine, who was already being called the God's hands at a young age after putting in effort upon effort. Catherine successfully completed the operation in the blink of an eye with amazing skill, even though the chairman's condition was so critical that he might not have survived if another doctor had been in charge. And despite it being a very difficult case, his subsequent progress was smooth. The nurses were surprised, saying it was a miracle, when they heard how dangerous the situation had been after the surgery. Seeing that situation, the owner said he was more grateful to Catherine than he could express, with tears in his eyes. After hearing the story up to that point, Catherine finally seemed to remember his father. Your father did indeed overcome a difficult operation. Has he been doing well without any changes since then? She asked, and the owner's eyes filled with tears as he said, yes. Thanks to Dr. Smith, my father was able to live peacefully after that without suffering. He said he was very happy to have his life extended beyond what it should have been, and to have more time to spend with his grandchildren. I had always wanted to convey that to you, but I never had the opportunity to meet you, and he gently wiped away the tears that were about to spill out, as if relieved to see it. Seeing that, Catherine calmly answered, is that so? I'm glad to hear that, and I couldn't help but think how typical it was of her to say so little. After that, the owner profusely apologized for the waiter's earlier attitude and said, I was aware that you had made a reservation for today. I had intended to leave it to a waiter I trusted, but I'm ashamed to say that the one who was so rude to you earlier is actually my nephew. Perhaps it's because he grew up being spoiled without putting in much effort, or maybe it's because he's good-looking. I don't know, but for some reason, he ended up providing such terrible service this time. Until now, he had been working diligently, and using the fact that I, the owner, am his relative as a shield, he somehow insisted on serving you himself instead of the waiter I had assigned, and wouldn't listen to reason. I don't know why he was so particular about serving you, but the fact remains that he did as he pleased while I took my eyes off him for a moment and made you uncomfortable. Of course, there will be no charge for today. I know an apology is not enough for today, but we will provide you with our most prized full-course meal and wine. So please don't leave like this. I want to convey, even if only slightly, my gratitude for your long-time patronage of our restaurant and my appreciation for Dr. Smith, and he apologizes profusely. When apologized to this extent, I no longer felt like blaming anyone. Moreover, it was the nephew who had used such underhanded means to make us uncomfortable in the moment the owner, who must be busy, took his eyes off him, and the owner and the restaurant itself had done nothing wrong. I said, Owner, please stop apologizing me. However, he didn't listen to me, so I went on to say, Owner, certainly your lack of management goes that far, but you made sure not to let him serve customers, knowing his personality well. Even though you were so considerate, I'm not angry at you at all. It's just very unfortunate that you had an employee like him. Until now, this restaurant has clearly had only people with good hearts working here. I really like not only the exterior and atmosphere of this restaurant, but also the little decorations, and above all, the service provided by you and your staff. That's why I kept using this restaurant on important days with my wife. However, even if you keep up appearances, it's never okay to look down on customers for any reason, and I think you know that. But he probably wouldn't stop even if you scolded him, right? So at the very least, I want a sincere apology from him. Then the owner said, You're absolutely right, Mr. Smith. Thank you for your generous words, and after a while, he hurriedly retreated to the back and brought out the waiter from earlier, who looked displeased with a sullen face. When told sternly, Come on, apologize, the waiter reluctantly apologized, saying, I'm terribly sorry for this. Seeing that, I thought it would be better not to have him serve customers for a while, and when I glanced at Catherine's reaction, she also had a subtle expression on her face. After that, we enjoyed a wonderful full course of food and drinks that I could never afford on my salary. Although the dishes we had been served until now were also amazingly delicious, the dishes we had this time were so delicious that I thought, are there still such wonderful things in this world? And Catherine and I got absorbed in eating, saying this is delicious, that is delicious, and for a moment, we were able to forget our sadness and feel like we were ascending to heaven. Thanks to their amazing food, this anniversary after my wife's death became a happy day for the first time. As I was enjoying the wine, which was said to be one of the highest quality, thinking that I didn't want this restaurant to disappear, the owner was smiling and looking at us. Before leaving the restaurant, I whispered something to the owner. The owner's eyes widened at my words, and he said, "I'm well aware that I'm in no position to ask this of you. But Mr. Smith, could you please keep coming to the restaurant for a while? I'll provide the meals for free." What the owner, who was probably raised by good parents, lacks in perspective is that people judge people to some extent by their appearance. When I told the owner that his nephew had probably treated us this way because of our attire, the owner was surprised, then became furious, and asked me to come to the restaurant for a while to see if he would become serious, if I didn't mind. At first, I hesitated, but Catherine seemed to really like the restaurant's food, saying she had never eaten such delicious food even with her high income. "Dad, it's a rare offer. Why don't you accept it?" she said. I pondered for a while, but I also wanted to see if he would be rehabilitated, so I told the owner that I would come to the restaurant for a while. After that, Catherine and I started having meals at that restaurant occasionally as a change of pace. The kind-hearted owner, I'm sure they still believe in him and would surely like him to have a little change of heart at that restaurant. However, flaws in people's personalities are not easily corrected. I think everyone knows that well. So the owner's aim is probably to have us visit unexpectedly and make him stay on his toes. Because they are all kind-hearted people, he might immediately take the owner and others for granted and do the same thing again when non-wealthy customers come. Moreover, it's because he's a relative they've known for many years that I also accepted the owner's proposal out of concern that he might take advantage of the owner's kindness. When he sees us, his expression changes for a moment, probably unconsciously, and he serves us as usual, but I don't know how long this will continue. However, even if we stop coming, I can only pray that he will take this opportunity to have a change of heart.